I'm super excited about this next panel. It's a topic that we are going to talk about and talk about and talk about and do and do and do until we fix it. And I thank you so much, panelists, for showing up, and Yvette for taking the lead on this important panel. I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Susan, for having us. As you mentioned, this is an all-important topic that we need to discuss and get it out there, get the real out there, as I say. People need to get woke and understand what is happening with social equity. I want to thank the panelists. Senator Bradford, thank you for being here today. Keith, thank you. Madison Shockley, Felicia Carbajal, thank you guys. All people that I know very well, who are very, very interested and concerned about the status of social equity today. So in that light, because we do have a short time to move forward, the one thing I want to preface this with is let's have a conversation around these issues, you know, not just question and answer, but let's just have a real robust conversation and talk about the realities with what has happened, what is happening, and what we expect to see happening in the future, and how instrumental can we be in shaping where equity goes. Senator Bradford, I'm going to start off with you because you took the lead in sponsoring legislation in the name of SB 1294. That was the first piece of legislation that I read in particular for social equity. So we'll start on that lens, but even before we do that, just take no more than 2 minutes and just give a little background on yourself, okay? No more than 2 minutes. And Senator Bradford, let's start with you.
How are you going to give an elected official only 2 minutes? You know what I'm saying?
Easy.
Thank you, Yvette. Thank you for the opportunity to be here, and for my fellow panelists here. She Bradford, representing the 35th Senate District, which is in LA County, South Bay cities from Inglewood to San Pedro. And before that, served in the State Assembly and on Gardena City Council. And just a little bit about myself. Grew up in Gardena and still live there to this day. Very much committed to civic engagement and you know, making sure our voices are heard on all levels. Before I entered this world of politics, I worked in corporate America from IBM to Southern California Edison, also as program director for LA Conservation Corps. And before all of that, in my college days, I was a club and record promoter. And that's what I really wanted to do. So when I was hearing Georgie Porgy, I knew that song all too well. And I like to tell the story. My claim to fame is Dr. Dre used to DJ for me. So, but no, I grew up with all those guys. And but I'm excited about what we do here in the legislature and being engaged. So if that's my 2 minutes, I'll stop right there.
Fantastic. Thank you, Senator Bradford. Promoter. I'll have to remember that one. Felicia Carbajal, who are you?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Felicia Carbajal. I am the Executive Director of the Social Impact Center and the Southern California Coordinator for National Expungement Week. A little bit about me is I got involved in this space in 1995 as a queer kid who had friends dying all around me. I'm formerly incarcerated, so I understand the war on drugs on typically a bigger scale than most people do. I'm also crazy enough that in the early 2000s, I dared to pivot back into cannabis after doing reentry related work, other social justice related work in particular. But I got reintroduced to this plant as medicine, and I'm very fortunate to have been around long enough to outlast a lot of individuals. I'm not going anywhere. Social equity at its core had a lot of us really engaged and hopeful, and it has a lot of us right now, including myself, ready to get dangerous, to push this conversation as far as we can, to talk about transformational justice the way that it should be applied. So that's a little bit about me.
Thank you, Felicia. Mr. Shockley.
Well, Madison Shockley, thank you for having me here, Yvette, and Senator Bradford, nice to be here with you. I'm a Los Angeles native, grew up here, and in my young teenage years was arrested for possession with intent to sell cannabis. And now 15, almost 20 years later, social equity legislation has been introduced, starting with Senator Bradford and expanded on in certain cities across California, including Los Angeles. And so I've been able to participate as a social equity applicant, and also in that process, working in the community, letting other folks know about social equity, whether they're community members, neighborhood council members, social equity applicants, and building networks among us in the community to take advantage of this opportunity that cannabis is.
Thank you, Madison. And Kika Keith.
Greetings, glad to be here. My name is Kika Keith. I am the founder of Life Development Group and co-founder of the Social Equity Owners and Workers Association here in Los Angeles. My background, I was into cannabis. I was raised in that area. My dad is a Rastafarian, and I was always taught to respect and teach the plant, treat the plant as if it was medicine. And I took that the opportunity when I learned about the social equity program. It's not only an opportunity to help bring wellness to my community in a different perspective, but also to create and start to close this economic wealth gap. And I thought it would be an opportunity for me to invest or reinvest into my community. And instead it has been a long, hard road that has forced me in the position to be a community advocate, or shall I say a freedom fighter, to fight for the rights of those that have been discriminated, those who've lost their lives, the mothers, the children, the fathers who have shed their blood, who have been incarcerated unfairly, as this has become a very capitalistic industry. And so we're here to fight and make sure that the intent of the social equity program is held true.
Thank you so much, Kika. And I'm Yvette McDowell, your host today, or moderator, should I say. I spent a decade and a half as a prosecutor in the city of Pasadena, California, and retired as an assistant city prosecutor. But what led me to the cannabis industry in 2017 was watching my mom fight the complications of Parkinson's disease, to go from a vibrant, active woman to being reduced to the bed, unable to feed herself, unable to eliminate herself, unable to bathe herself, just seeing her totally, totally debilitated. And I learned after her death in 2017, May, that there were medicinal benefits that was being shown through the use of cannabis for Parkinson's patients. And that led me into the industry to fight for people who wanted choice in their medical treatment. And as going through that struggle, that's when I met all of these folks that you see here. And I became very, very much interested in the social equity plight. And today, that is where my law practice focuses. It centers on social equity and making sure that things are being done in an equitable manner as it pertains to those engaging, whether you're an investor, whether you are a business owner, wherever you are in the space, I may see you at some point in time. So from that lens, that's how we start today. And as I said, I'm going to start with Senator Bradford because it was the first piece of legislation that I read, SB 1294. And Senator Bradford, I know that you were responsible for moving this piece of legislation through, getting it passed, and just laying the framework for what SB 1294 looked like, what social equity should look like. So today, how do you feel that it's measuring up to what you put in place? And if it's not measuring up, why do you think it's not? And where should we go from here to ensure that things are done responsibly, that there's accountability and oversight? And I know there's compound questions in there for you, but I know you can handle it.
Well, let me get to the core of it and say that it's not living up to the intent of the bill. I introduced 1294 in 2017 because I quickly saw on a industry that was just in its infancy how quickly it was white male dominated. And everyone that I was meeting with wanting to talk about cannabis did not look like me. And I quickly huddled up with a bunch of folks and said, we need to do something about it. So we drafted 1294. We got it passed with a great level of support from a variety of individuals. But when it was time to roll that first $10 million out the following year, and it was supposed to be in April of 2018, we quickly got the spreadsheet of where this money was going. And of that 10 million, 4 million was going to Humboldt. So I immediately jumped up and ran down to the governor's office and asked them to pump the brakes on this thing and say, hey, this is not what social equity was about. This is not what it looks like. Humboldt has never been impacted by the war on drugs, other than that internal war of growers up there that they have their little world in and of itself, but they had never been impacted the same way Black and brown communities had been impacted. This money was designed to go into those communities, be it in LA, be it in Stockton, be it wherever it might be, where people were impacted by the war on drugs. So I say it's falling short of that. We were able to do a reset and redirect some of that money to Los Angeles and places, as I stated, down to San Diego, but it's still much work to be done. It's important that we have discussions like we're having today to keep people engaged, because a lot of folks are now at the table simply because they know it's money there. And a lot of folks I know are not committed to social equity. A certain entity met with me in Sacramento 2 years ago, and they wanted to tell me how they wanted to invest in confidence. So I sat there and I listened to them, and I'm waiting for them to tell me, the real social issues that they wanted to address, like employment, in that city, help with the tax base. I heard none of that. The only thing came out of his mouth was, we polled, and cannabis from Compton sells polls higher than anywhere else. So we just want our cannabis to be from Compton, but we really don't give a crap about the city in and of itself. So that's not what social equity is about either, to exploit those communities. So I thank you for your work here. It's still much work to be done. I appreciate the governor who agreed wholeheartedly that we needed to redirect this money into those communities that had been drastically impacted over the last 40 years. And this industry should look as diverse as California, because if we were talking about the criminalization of marijuana, it would be nothing but Black and brown people in the room. But when we talk about the entrepreneurial opportunities, again, most of the time we see white males and white males only. And I even had some challenges with how the city of LA rolled out their program. And I think it should have been a little bit more laser focused and targeted in those communities versus looking at total zip codes. I says, because total zip codes skews where those communities that were impacted at. So we see a lot of times folks who have moved into that area or lived in those zip codes, but were never in the communities that were impacted. So there's still much work to be done, and I'm committed to making sure that this program really works.
Thank you very much for that. And you've touched on some issues that we're going to unpack today. One of the things I also want to ask you is, do you think we need to have more legislation for oversight in terms of where that money is going, how that money is being utilized, and does your office play a part in that particular area?
For sure, we need more oversight. I even challenged the Cannabis Control Board that you need greater diversity there. What really prompted this legislation was in 2017, we were having a Democratic caucus and Jerry Brown was speaking to us. And we also had Lori Ajax and the folks that were that made up the Cannabis Board. And they clearly admitted how little they knew about this industry. And I says, well, then maybe you guys should go hire folks who know a little bit about it, and whether they're formerly incarcerated, whomever, whether they were in the underground market back then, the illegal market, bring them in and help them educate you as to what this industry was all about. And they were totally naive. So yes, my office is continuing to work, and I think we need greater oversight, but we need greater diversity within the Bureau to help achieve these goals as well.
Absolutely, thank you. I'm gonna shift to my friend with the Happy Meal. And I think she knows what I'm talking about when it's a little more than a happy meal in terms of funding that's been given. Felicia, you've been battling this for a long time in this industry, and I learned so much from you as we move forward. Just piggybacking on what Senator Bradford has said, give me some of your take on what you've seen, the efforts that you've put in, mainly the response from the efforts that you've put in, conversations that you've had that have not come to fruition, and where do you see this going?
That's a lot of questions, but
I
to
know.
piggyback off of Senator Bradford, like the one thing that I often tell my friends that live in the Great North, because that's what I call the Emerald Triangle, that when camp came for you, there was only 10 of you on 10 acres or 100 acres. In urban areas, in communities where I grew up, there were 10,000 of us stacked on top of each other. So when camp rolled through, they didn't just pick up our moms and dads. They picked up our neighbors. They picked up a lot of people. And I'm not trying to minimize anybody's experience, because I often get backlash when people tell me I'm not. Like, having a gun pointed in your face, whether you're black, white, brown, doesn't matter, it's still scary. But the reality is, when we talk about scale, right? Because that's what we're talking about when we talk about equity. We're talking about that portion of what's due to communities. So like me personally, the pushback I've gotten from the industry regarding corporate social responsibility, because to remind the industry that like you only really exist to serve the folks who consume cannabis, marijuana, whatever you want to call her, she's okay with it. But you serve us, and the majority of the population who consumes this plant look like this panel. Those are just facts. But when you continue to alienate certain groups of people, you continue to minimize their struggle in particular, which is often what's happening when people are trying to pit conversations and weigh this out. Like, all we're asking for, at least all I'm asking for, is that we actually get true investment, because I believe that Black and brown people in this state, I'm a native to, I grew up, my grandparents were farm workers, they marched with Cesar Chavez, like that our people are entitled. Somebody called it an entitlement in the comments. If you want to talk about sure, you're on borrowed land, all of these things. We're entitled to have this type of investment in particular, because when you look at the numbers, and if you actually had a true understanding of the war on drugs, because one of the things that Yvette and Kika and I often talk about is the minimization. Because people will always tell me, oh, Felicia, you're not a nonviolent drug offender. And I'm like, well, no shit. I didn't have that option in the hood that I lived in. I wasn't going to get beat. I wasn't going to get robbed. And sure as hell, nobody was going to rape me. So what does that mean in communities of color when we're talking about all of those layers of stacking certain crimes in particular? Like, I don't know a lot of white people who had those same measures added up against them to have any level of success. So, I mean, it's hard, like, because I talk to a lot of my friends, people I've known for a lot of years, and I don't want to call them racist, because I'm like, man, are you that entitled? Are you that privileged? Are you that disconnected to what we as people of color are asking for? Like, even personally, I often will tell people, like, look, right now, as a non-Black person of color, my job is to support Black leadership, period. And people will look at me side-eye when I say that. And it's to really acknowledge that, like, hey, man, aren't you watching anything? Have you even just watched Cops? Like, just some, I know they cut it off, but have you ever watched it on repeat? Who are the people they're going after? They are not going after blonde hair, blue-eyed people. Maybe in some of the more, what's the proper word? In some of the areas in the South, maybe that'll pop up every now and again. but like the target has been on Black and brown people's backs. So all we're asking for in an industry that we built, that we continue to pour dollars into, you can check my numbers. Yesterday, I averaged somewhere between $400 to $800 a month. I am the consumer base you want to have. So some of us just want to be respected for the amount of resources that we're pouring back in to this industry. And that really is going to start with treating us with the dignity and respect that we deserve as people who really lay down the foundation. And if we want to add an extra layer, because I know Yvette likes it when I add extra layers, and so do Kika, that if we get down to brass tacks on all of this and acknowledge how this plant got to this country, period, then we'd also be cognizant that we owe this to our Black siblings, period. That's all I got, Yvette.
All right, and that was a mouthful. But one thing I can tell you folks is that you are in for a treat. This is a platform where we are going to keep it real. We're not going to sugarcoat anything, but we're just going to lay it out there the way it needs to be laid out. And I hope everybody can handle that. If you can't, I really don't know what to tell you, but just keep listening. We want to educate you. Senator Bradford, did you want to say something?
I just said if they can't handle it, say bye.
We're keeping it real. I'm going to move to Kika Keith, who's a social equity applicant at this time. Just received an invoice, I understand, from the city of Los Angeles. There's been a lot of controversy around social equity in Los Angeles. So just talk to us a little bit about what you've had to go through to get to this point where we are now. And I know we're going to discuss issues of accountability, predatory agreements, vetting of applications. All of this stuff is critical in someone having success in their business. So take us a little bit through your journey, if you would.
Sure. I learned about the program in 2017. At the time, I had a product in Whole Foods, a beverage line, and I was in it since 2008. I made an active decision once I knew it was legal in this program, which we thought was going to start at the beginning of 2018. I went inactive on the shelves, thinking that, hey, I had a 6 month window, learn the ordinance, get involved, participate, and be prepared for licensing in 2018. And in participating and digging deep into the rules and the regulations and going to the commission meetings and the council meetings, which, you know, the government says that is our responsibility to partake in the process. We did, participated in working groups. And what I started to see is that the program was designed to fail. There was no budget that was set. When they finally did give a budget of $10 million, early in 2018, it was reassigned to the police department. So now you have us in a position where you have these applicants that were told that you had to have a property to participate. I know mothers and daughters who have sold their grandparents' home in order to participate. And every single step of the way, the things that were originally designed, the program to be 2 for 1, for every one general applicant, they were to bring on 2 social equity applicants. Instead, they let the existing marijuana dispensaries come on board in phase 1. And then you saw 187 dispensaries come online before social equity. Only 4 were African-American, the beginning of the problem. And that's what we've seen systematically. You know, what I'm looking for is accountability. Who holds the city officials responsible for following the rules and the laws that were placed? Because we studied them. We went into South Central LA when there was no business licensing and compliance support, no training, no preparation. We had study groups of 30, 40 people learning this information, bringing in industry experts to teach us. And every step of the way, they dismantled the program. They took away the community reinvestment. Let's remember, when we speak about the war on drugs, it wasn't just about the people that were incarcerated. It was those that were affected by the collateral damage, the mothers and children that were left without fathers and brothers and husbands in their homes. That began a whole systematic raid on our communities and in our families. And so those were the people that were looking for the support. And from day one until now, 3 years later, There has not been one dime spent to coming into the community to train. We fought. Felicia, Madison, a whole group of us, Budget and Finance Committee, after we lost that $10 million, we came back because we heard excuse after excuse. We don't have a budget. We don't have personnel. We don't have this. And every step of the way, all we saw is time ticking. To the point that in this earlier last year, as we waited 2.5 years, I was holding a property for 2.5 years while waiting at $12,000 a month. My investor left after spending over $250,000. And then the results of the audit of the licensing process came out, and folks got in early on a first come, first served process. So on top of waiting all this time, and my story is not singular, this is everybody's challenge as applicants who had to fight to get investors, fight predatory practices. And when we finally made it, the whole system was flawed. And even then, they still wanted to keep with the lies and the corruption. Hate to say it, but I can't say it any other smoothly or lightly, because that's what it was. They knew, and it took 9 months. It took us forming a union of sorts, the Social Equity Owners and Workers Association, to file a lawsuit against the city for them to even begin to recognize the wrongs. And as applicants who already have a disadvantage, who don't have any technical assistance, do not have opportunities to train to be a part of the workforce. You know, we're not looking for a handout, we're looking for a fair opportunity to compete. And even on that, that was taken away from us. And there should have been no reason why that we had to, amongst ourselves, raise money to hire a lawyer to file a suit against the city to win 100 additional licenses. It's unfair, it's improper, it's immoral. And, you know, at this point, we're tired of fighting the city and expecting government. No disrespect, Senator Bradford, because you have done an amazing work, but we know it takes more than just you. And my purpose, I've been on a lot of these webinars speaking about the problems, but at this point, I'm making an appeal to the industry because the government is not doing it. And if we wait for them, there'll continue to be excuse after excuse. We're figuring it out. We're trying to get this. And as we know, billions of dollars are being made. They're not coming into our communities. We're not having the licensing opportunities. And if the industry doesn't get behind us and start rallying and saying the same thing that we're saying, there could be a lot of challenges ahead. And I'm hoping that we start to see the turn in that.
All right, that was a mouthful and well said, Kika. Madison, I want to move to you because I know that you're a social equity applicant as well in Los Angeles, and you've had your share of challenges. Talk to us about that journey, what it looks like to you at this point in time, some of the things that you see that you know are actively going on that need to be addressed, people need to know about.
Yeah, you know, Kika really did a great job of kind of explaining the journey to this point for us as applicants. And, you know, part of that not having the technical assistance provided by the city this whole time, you know, there's a breakdown there, by the way. You know, Senator Bradford worked so hard to get this money allocated from the state. And then that money doesn't get down to anything that actually affects us as applicants. So not having technical assistance, like having resources where the city is hiring attorneys and accountants to help applicants as they're making deals with investors as part of this program. People didn't have that. So as a result, you have people who couldn't afford attorneys and had, you know, sophisticated investors, you know, push contracts on them using all sorts of different kind of predatory practices, like, you know, waiting to the last minute right before the application is due to present a 45-page contract and telling the applicant you have to sign it right now, or else I'm going to have to pick another applicant because it's the last minute and we need to sign this lease. And the applicant, you know, most applicants were under pressure like that when they had to sign their contracts. And so now we see that applicants are in positions where their contracts do not meet the equity share requirements that are in the law. And unfortunately, the DCR has taken a position that they're not going to vet and enforce these agreements, that's going to be on between the applicant and their investor.
And
Where
Madison,
obviously,
I want to stop you right there. I want to interject
sure,
something. With equity share, what does that look like for an applicant? What does that mean for the audience, for those who may not know what the equity share looks like?
sure. The equity share regulation is really the core of the social equity legislation here in LA. And it means that the equity applicant must retain at least 51% of equity in the business, and also an equivalent in voting rights to their equity share. So at least 51% control and equity in the business. Now, we've seen working with other applicants, we started an organization. I'm also a co-founder of the Social Equity Owners and Workers Association. And, since a lot of these applicants don't have attorneys or advisors to go to, they come to us often. And we've seen time after time contracts where there's preconditions put on this equity share. So, they represent to the city that the equity applicant has 51%. But really in the contract that's submitted to the city that the city is not checking, it shows that the investor technically owns a large part of that 50%, if not all of that 51%.
And as you mentioned, vetting. So talk about vetting, how it relates to that 51% equity share, and why is vetting important? Why is it necessary?
And forgive me if I have some background noise, you guys. They're cutting a tree down right outside of my door here. But it's vetting is just like any other aspect of the application. You're not allowed to be located within 600 feet of a school. You can't be within 700 feet of another location. The city checks all these things to make sure you're compliant with those, but they're not checking to make sure you're compliant with the equity share regulation, which is the whole core and purpose of this program.
Yeah, and I understand that. So what have you done as an association? I hear you talk about the formation of the Social Equity Owners and Workers Association, and you guys did something I think that was pretty unique to help address some of this. Can you talk a little bit about what you've done?
Kika and I started working in the community about 2 years ago. And since the beginning, we've held Sunday meetings where we invite folks from the community and other applicants to come get educated on the business. We've had CPA firms come in and give presentations about taxes and all these different sorts of things. And now, oops, sorry. And now we've done this mostly without outside help. It's really been, we haven't had a whole lot of support, even from private industry. But recently we've been working with attorneys from LACBA, the LA County Bar Association, to provide pro bono legal assistance to applicants. And it's really, really been a timely thing. Now that the new equity share regulations have been beefed up in the last couple months by the city council. They've put a lot more language in there and protections. Attorneys are meeting with applicants and their investors and sorting it out and saying, look, you have to change this contract to be compliant with the rules and regulations. And so we're starting to see some good outcomes from that. And this has really just been something that our organization has been working through you, Yvette, with LACBA, putting together some assistance for folks.
What do you find the reception has been from investors as they go back, the applicants go back and they try to renegotiate contracts or, just have that discussion? What has that been like?
Ooh, it's been a mixed bag, but it's been a lot of very disappointing reactions from investors. I've seen really investors not responding well to want to comply. They don't want to comply. They don't see why they have to. They mostly are telling applicants, if you don't stick to what we signed a year ago, then I'm going to sue you. I'm going to come after you with everything I have, and I will bury this business and it won't go anywhere. Or you can just comply with what you originally signed and everything will be great. That's been mostly the reaction.
And, you know, Senator Bradford, hearing these stories, hearing how the investor community has reacted to a change now in some of the ordinances, I mean, you as a legislator, uh, what is your stance on that? What is it that you can do moving forward to help curtail some of this or put some checks and balances on what's going on here?
I mean, to hear this is very troubling, but it's not new information. And what we really need to do is have a better understanding on the local level. And that's been part of my frustration, because about 75% of these communities, despite having Prop 64 passing and cannabis is the law of the land now, it's legal, it's still, you have those internal siloed barriers within these small communities that still want to bury their heads. And then you have cities like LA, despite seeing they want to move forward, you have many challenges there. And it's individual who I've worked with over the last 3 years, Kat Packard. I give her a whole lot of credit, but she has a whole lot of challenges, more internal than external, in trying to get this program off the ground. And I think, as Kika stated, some of these investors come in this community wanting to exploit and take advantage. And I don't know if it requires more legislation on the state level, and I'm more than happy to look at that. But I know what my other colleagues are looking at. They want to put more money into enforcement and not into building these programs out. And so it's a mixed bag as to where do we go. But it's far from perfect, and we're kind of like building the plane as we fly. But I think we could do much better than what we're seeing happening right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I understand that they want more money into enforcement, but they've already tried. The war on drugs has been a failure, as we've seen, and more enforcement is not going to resolve the systemic problems that we have going on right now. And I wholeheartedly agree with you from that local position. The localities must do better. They must deal with lack of infrastructure moving forward and other things that needs to happen, as opposed to just throwing something against the wall, hoping it sticks. Because as you said, a lot of this is being built as you fly, but at the same time, there are other industries that have been around for a long time that are regulated, and it's no different than cannabis. So you take note from what's happening with some of these other industries and you move forward. You know, Felicia, I want to pivot to you for a moment, because, you know, we've had these discussions about regulations, what locals aren't doing, and you've had a lot of insight and a lot of infight when it comes to that. So I really would like to get some feedback from you on that as well.
I mean, I feel like just sitting on this panel and being reminded of the years worth of work that so many of us have already done. I mean, I remember in 2017, once we had legalization, and I called a roundtable meeting and brought a bunch of leaders, and we couldn't even, you know, get on the same page about our 10 demands. We finally got on the same page. And I'm like, just looking at those demands, those are the same demands we're asking for 3 years later. And as somebody who like helped lead the charge for us to get that $9 million from the city of Los Angeles to fund Kat's department, like part of me is all like, did we even really do that? Like, Kika, you said we did, but I'm all like, I don't even remember it even manifesting past that. So, I mean, I think, you know, we've done a lot of things throughout the years. Like, you know, we did that report with UFCW to just lay some foundation so that people had a basic understanding of what everybody seemed to forget. And that Black and brown people have been so economically disempowered for such a long time, and that even dangling the idea of a license is only for Black and brown exceptionalism. And see, I believe my siblings are exceptional, period. And I know a lot of people don't have that kind of same thought process, but I mean, that's really how I feel. Like I'm on a panel with exceptional human beings who really want to see all of this all the way through, right? So what does that mean? It's almost like, okay, guys, let's go back to what we originally said, that if you don't empower people, you're continuing to disempower them. And, you know, as a community organizer who's been a part of a lot of different intersectional movements, like we have weed. It blows my mind that those of us who organize, who actually consume this plant, like we have that to help us, you know, de-stress and do all of those things, yet we haven't moved those mountains that we need to. And the conversation continues to move further and further away from what true social equity is supposed to look like, what it's supposed to look like to do something that transforms our society. Because like independent of transforming an industry, which I think is cute and funny, I mean, we've never done it anywhere, in any industry. I mean, I'm super fortunate that when I came home, like I had opportunities in the entertainment industry, like they got tax write-offs for being able to hire me so that I could do things. But in the cannabis industry, we get even pushback when I remember suggesting that on numerous occasions, like, dude, I'm an organizer. How many community groups you need me to go and round up so that we can go fight for that? And virtually every trade association that I've propositioned like this to do community reinvestment so that they can look good, it's fallen on deaf ears. So, I mean, I'm a little bit at a loss. Because like Kika is still going back and asking folks, I'm like demanding you, I'm challenging you, like, come on, weed people, we're better than this. We're better than this. So, I mean, there's a lot to be said, Yvette. I don't know if I hit everything you needed me to hit, but, you know, being in just that retrospective and listening to Kika remind us of all the things that we did with nothing. Like to tell people like we made magic happen with nothing, y'all, nothing. Like we turned 50 cents into $1.50 every single time. And that's the kind of ingenuity that you find in our communities. And I don't know if that threatens other people. And I mean, that's the only thing I can think of is that it threatens other people that I know how to turn 50 cents into $1.50. Madison knows how, Kika knows how, Yvette knows how. Senator Bradford can even stretch it further. He can even stretch it even further than that. But, you know, it's time that, you know, in this call in, because I got tired of calling people out because some people don't even care when you call them out.
Yeah. I'd like to add something to that. That's a great point, Felicia, that we've done all this with nothing, with little, next to no support from the city or government or from industry folks. And that is what has to change. Everybody has to pitch in on this. And actually, you know, we've won some things in our struggle that benefit everybody. You know, our lawsuit has created 100 additional retail store opportunities. And that helps the entire industry. No matter where you are, it makes a healthier ecosystem in this, you know, retail stores have been the bottleneck of this industry, you know, and so.
I agree with you 100%. I mean, we fed 1,100 families last week during National Expungement Week, which, if everybody knows, there's been connection to the cannabis industry. So we make them look good all the time. Like 1,100, I already know last week I fed more people than some elected officials in our own cities since COVID started. And 1 week we managed to feed 1,100 families, register 130 new voters, and help 150 people with legal assistance. And that was the grassroots just stepping up because we got a little frustrated. We got a little tired of what the idea of healing from the industry looked like. It looked like you collecting our tax dollars, my tax dollar. I'm serious when I say yesterday I picked up $300 worth of edibles, 100 of it was in taxes, and you think that you're holding on to my change like that is you contributing? I don't know how to say get out of here. Like, really get out of here. You should be embarrassed. Like, some of y'all really should be embarrassed who think that that is doing your due diligence or doing your fair share. Like, you're holding on to my money. And then you're crying about holding on to my money and paying the taxes that I already paid. So, I mean, grow up. I remember somebody saying that before in 2016 that, oh, we're getting legalization. This was somebody very prominent from the industry who said we should grow up. I'm telling the industry it's time for y'all to grow up now, because those of us who are doing the real hard work and the heavy lifting, some of us are tired. Some of us are frustrated with your inaction. I know I'm one of them. Maybe Kika's hand is up because she's one of them too.
Yeah, her video is disabled, but Kika, you take yourself off mute and hop in on the conversation, even though you're on phone and we can't see you, we can hear you.
Okay, great. I just wanted to chime in on Senator Bradford's statement earlier about, we're building a plane as we're flying it. 3 years later, it's a point where we got to start looking at a different blueprint. And one thing that I've seen with all these working groups and leaders, and I wonder where they're all at today, 3 years later. But from the state to the municipalities, there are these working groups and decisions made on policies that affect the communities that were ravaged by the war on drugs. And never once are we sitting at these tables. I was fortunate to be at the table to be an advocate and a leader and also a social equity applicant, but most times I was the only social equity applicant at the table. So when you start to look, you can't go to the cities and say, hey, how do we fix these problems when they're the ones creating the problems? You must go to the applicants, to the social equity owners, and to the workers, and to the license holders, and say, what's going on? What has been your problems? What are your needs? And then start developing policies and looking at budgets that start to really affect the needs, not on what you think. It's the same thing, Senator Bradford, as you said to Lori Ajax when they were starting. You can't develop this cannabis industry's laws and you don't have the cannabis industry at the table telling you how to do it. You can't tell me what the folks from my community need when you're not sitting with the people who are in need. And so I challenge from a state level and from a local level to develop a social equity oversight commission. Let us be at the table and tell you what we've learned and what went wrong and what went right. And then I believe that's when we'll start to see the changes in the social equity program. Sure, let the bigger industry speak to those bigger tables, but when you're talking about this program that has obviously failed, not just in LA, but nationally, it is for the same reason, because we're not at the table explaining what policies should be developed around the needs to make us successful. So that's the challenge that I lay forth to government. And once again, I say the same thing to the industry. There's a point where we need you to demand it. We are developing products, but we can't get on the shelves. Where's the supplier diversity program, and why does it need to be a law, right? You know about the communities that were affected by the war on drugs. Where's your corporate social responsibility to hiring people who have been affected by the war on drugs? Because I go into these shops and they don't look like me or my brown partners. So I say there has to be some accountability outside of what's written in the rule of law that we as an industry step forth. But then I also challenge this government. We've got to start listening and having these panel discussions internally at the city halls, at the state capitals, and start talking to us and find out how do we start fixing and righting these wrongs.
Can I weigh in on that?
Absolutely, Senator.
Ms. Keith, I couldn't have stated it any better. And part of my frustration is constantly we as legislators are always advocating or legislating on how we fix a problem that we really know nothing about. Always, and I equate the social equity program in cannabis to some of our environmental programs that we legislate for. And we always use Black and brown people as the poster childs of why we should do some of this environmental programs, but we never have them at the table. We never have those communities that are impacted on a daily basis at the table. We allow our friends from the more affluent neighborhood to pull up in their Teslas to tell us what those environmental benefits should be. And the same thing is happening here in cannabis. And again, as I confronted Ms. Ajax and her staff, again, you can't regulate, you can't manage a industry that you know nothing about. And even to say, I remember one of them saying, oh, I didn't know it was this many different strands of cannabis out there. I mean, well, maybe again, you should hire folks who do know a little bit about this. I had to educate myself because I didn't know a whole lot of stuff. So I've always surrounded myself around people who know this industry, because I don't. But at the same time, I'm willing to admit that what I don't know, but at the same time, what Ms. Keith says, we have to bring you guys to the table, have you in the room, having you shape this policy. Because again, if you leave it up to legislators, we want more money for enforcement. And what this pandemic has clearly shown, you had cannabis identified as an essential business, but at the same time, you didn't qualify for PPP because of federal regulations. So it was millions, if not billions, going to companies that didn't need it. But here you are as an essential industry, and you couldn't take advantage of any of these dollars. But at the same time, you saw growth in consumer need during this crisis situation. So it's a lot we have to fix, especially the banking aspect of this, of how do we bank this industry? And until we do that, you're going to continue to have all these challenges. So we need our bankers to sit down. We need our business folks to sit down. We need, again, our elected officials, but more importantly, we need you folks who are in the industry to be invited to the table and have that discussion. So.
Absolutely. Thank you, Senator Bradford, for that. Oh my goodness, we could keep going on and on talking about these. But in our last few minutes, let's get to some solutions. What would you like to see happening moving forward? Because it's one thing to come to the table and we can address all of the challenges that we've seen, challenges that we know continue to persist today. But as we move forward, what are the demands? What are we calling for to see happen in terms of changes to move forward to make sure that equity is equitable? And we have to have some changes in that light. So Felicia, I want to start with you. What would you like to see happen moving forward, put in place?
I think it's twofold, and I think a lot of it is stuff that everybody touched on. Like, people have been so disempowered with just the process and not having the right type of information to even get involved. So that's like one of my big ones. And then my next one, because I'm never going to let up marijuana industry on court. I'm never letting up. You're going to become corporate, your responsibility level. After the week I saw in my little bubble privilege, because I do got a bubble privilege, y'all. Bubble, just the same as your bubbles. The lack of true corporate social responsibility and true accountability. Because when Yvette said the McDonald's Happy Meal, that's what social equity is to me. It's a Happy Meal per household and everybody's got to share it. And that's how people are behaving. So, wasn't planning on getting emotional, but I'm really not going anywhere. I have decades of experience of organizing, which means that all of my friends are going to be called to the table that sit at all of the intersections that matter. People who like to do stuff, people who like to push, people like myself who want to see that money, those tax dollars actually go back to the community because we deserve it. Listen, guys, our community deserve, like, I don't know how to express that enough, deserve this economic opportunity, deserve this economic investment. So, I mean, education is going to be crucial. And then for me, and all of you guys already know that because I already looked through all of the attendees, you guys know who I am. You already know my name. You already know what I'm connected to. The next time I go to the California Democratic Convention as a delegate, I'm going to be flapping my gums again as I organize with the LGBTQ community, not just the token ones. I'm going to let them know too that, hey guys, the compassion that we built in the 1990s is really being sacrificed for a few people. and our Black siblings, our brown siblings are being left out. Trust me, you don't want the LGBTQ community coming after you, not on some social shit.
Thank you, my sister. Appreciate that. We have about 6 minutes left. Madison, quickly, moving forward here,
Yeah.
what do we need to do?
You know, I really, especially since we have Senator Bradford here, I'd love to see some of those dollars that were allocated to help in social equity reach those applicants with services and just, you know, dollars, grants. I'm an applicant. I was selected for a retail license, and I had to pay this $9,000 invoice. And I thought that part of the social equity program and the dollars for this would go to fee deferrals, and we haven't seen that. On top of this $9,000, there's another $27,000 in fees coming my way, just at the LA City level, and probably another $30,000 on the state level. So we're talking $60,000, $70,000 in just fees. And if some of those dollars could go to help pay those fees, I could put more dollars into my business. And so I think that's something critical. If you could help kind of communicate with some of the folks here in LA, how important that is, that would be really helpful. And then also the equity share regulations being vetted, like seriously by the city. That's critical. If social equity applicants start out with less than their 51%, the program's failed. You know, that's the whole point, is for us to be in a position where we can create a lasting financial legacy for our families. And that legacy is built into that contract that we have with our investors. How much of this revenue is going to generate into our pockets in our communities? And so those two things I think are critical right now.
Absolutely. Kika?
I'll make mine real simple. We are in a state of emergency. It's 3 years later. My rent has now went up to $14,000 a month. We still don't know when or what the processing will be. And all of these problems that we spoke about could be solved by one simple thing. And I'm just going to keep saying until someone decides, Senator Bradford, that it is an emergency. We do need a commission of oversight. Every other industry, like Yvette says, there are third-party auditors. If the government can't get this emergency bill, moratorium, something passed in order to make sure that immediately we need to audit what's happening right now, right? Because you don't hear our stories. You don't hear of all the losses. All you hear is we're working on it, we're fixing it, we'll get it together, but you're not hearing the extreme loss and hardship that the applicants are facing. And so I'm asking, once again, that this commission be put forth. And if the government can't do it, industry, all of our great consultants and lawyers, we need to gather together these organizations, and we need to start really evaluating, listening to these stories, and begin to audit. Where is this money going to? Where did $3 million go last year? Forget the $7 or $8 million from this year, right? Where is the money going to? We're not getting it. And so there has to be a point where we stop saying we're going to figure this out. They're still working on it. Let's hire some more people. We need some more money. And we start saying and holding folks accountable. And so that's what I'm saying. All of the other things will fall into place with this commission. We'll start looking at community reinvestment. We'll start looking at the social equity workers mandate. We'll start looking at the corporate social responsibility. We'll start looking at the equity share requirements. But somebody has to stop. And so I'm asking now that folks just step up and say, we've got to start auditing, and it begins now, October 1st. That's
all right, Ms. Kika Keith and Senator Bradford.
Again, I should just say ditto to what Ms. Keith stated. I'm all in support of a independent review panel, because I too am concerned of where this money's going, making sure it reaches the people who need it the most. I also want to go back to what Mr. Shockley stated. Last year, I authored SB 595, which was a fee waiver and deferral legislation that the governor signed. So I want to understand why folks like you are not being made aware of that, or it's not assisting you, because that's what that bill was for, to make sure that you didn't have to incur some of these exorbitant fees to get started. We understand the barrier to entry is usually financial. So that's what 595 was about. So I wish you would contact my office if it's any way we can help you on that, because that's what that measure was for. Again, we're looking at I had this conversation with the governor's office about a reset or a suspension or a reduction of taxes. That's critical. I mean, the price, the taxes right now, if you ask someone to go into a retail shop and you're going to spend as much as 40% more, why shouldn't you continue to do what you've been doing with the illegal market? So we do need to fix those taxes, because the promise of the billions of dollars that were supposed to come to California, we've fallen way short of what we expected. And it's part of the tax problem that we've imposed on the industry that's still in its infancy. So we need to do a reset or look at that. So that's something I'm working on too. And again, the banking, it's we introduced banking legislation 2 years ago. We'll introduce it again next year, because until you can bank this money, you know, it's going to lead to greater assistance on you being able to get a loan, but until it's still deemed illegal. But then I'll end on this. We need to educate elected officials, local, state, on federal, on what this is. It's not a drug, it's a plant. And if we know the history of why it was ever at Schedule 1, it was to incarcerate Black and brown people in the 30s and the 40s. That's the only reason it went to Schedule 1. But if we don't know the historical aspect and we just deal from right now and deem it as a drug, it does everybody a disservice. It's a plant, just like the ones that are growing right behind McDowell right there, the bamboo right there. So, you know, I mean, really, so it's no different. You have mushrooms that are psychotropic, you got mushrooms that are edible that you nourish yourself, and you got mushrooms that can kill you, but it's a plant. And we need to deal with cannabis just as it is and remove the Schedule 1 from the Schedule 1. And that's something we're trying to work on. I had a resolution to Congress, but due to the COVID, it got suspended. I'll reintroduce that resolution again to remove cannabis from a Schedule 1.
Absolutely. And thank you all. Susan, I know that we are up on 3:45, which was the time to end our panel. And I just want to thank all of the panelists. You guys are fantastic. You brought it to the people with honest conversation, move forward. And I want to leave with the last thing. Where are all of the trade associations? Why are you not working together? Because together we can get so much more accomplished. And if we can see that, I don't care who you are out there, I don't care what your personal politics is, the cannabis industry will not move forward unless we are all sitting at the table, headed in the same direction for the same reason. So folks, come on, let's put your bickering aside and let's come together as grown-up folks. And let's talk about this, let's get some movement, and let's watch this industry flourish and look like the people who built it. Because if we don't, you can be rest assured there are people waiting to do it. So Susan, I will turn it back over to you.
Well, Yvette, thank you so much. I mean, you kind of, you took my announcement. Next month,
you can have it.
Next month, we are going to get together. I want to hear from all of the people in all of the organizations. We're going to get together. We're going to have a round table. We're going to have a professional facilitator. We're going to have Rob Bonta, hopefully Senator Bradford, Fiona Ma. We're going to have a lot of our lawmakers in the room, and we're going to get all the organizations. I've been trying to do this for over a decade. It's time. It's time for us to get together. We are not going to get anything done if we don't get together. So next month, it's not November, it's Yesvember. We're going to do it. All right. Thank you so much, panel. This was beautiful. I can't wait to get the recording out there. Yvette, you're an amazing moderator. Thank you, everybody. Let's keep this conversation going. Oh, before you go, everybody wants your contact information in the chat. So lots of people want to help and do stuff, and so let's make sure to do that.
Tupac, I ain't hard to find. All my stuff's online.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Susan.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you,
Thank you,
everybody.
guys.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Susan. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.
Mr. Stockley, good seeing you again.
Good to see you, Senator.
Always.
Thank you, Senator. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Yvette. Thank you for the invitation.
Absolutely.